I recently watched most of the old Simpsons episodes in the wrong aspect ratio, thanks a lot Disney+. I have also seen a lot of new Simpsons, which is far worse. Some people who have not watched The Simpsons wonder how a show that was so renowned is now known as one of the most boring pieces of television in existence. So today I thought I'd show this effect by examining 2 episodes of the seasonal Halloween specials. The Treehouse of Horror series started in season 2 and is arguably some of the best episodes of television ever put to screen. However, just like the rest of The Simpsons, they have really started to become bland and boring. So today, I decided to examine 2 Treehouse of Horror episodes whose segments are similar somewhat in concept. Today, I'll be talking about the best episode and one of the worst episodes in the Treehouse of Horror series. This is Treehouse of Horror 5 versus Treehouse of Horror 28. Anyone who has watched the early Treehouse of Horror episodes will tell you their graveyard openers are amazing. One of the Simpson family members will warn the audience, and then some funny tombstones are shown. The opening for Treehouse of Horror 5 is perhaps the most iconic. Marge first warns the audience before Bart, Lisa, and Homer take over the airways. I'm not going to spoil any of the jokes, as that is what makes these episodes work. But regardless, this is a fantastic way to open up the episode. Now, cut to Treehouse of Horror 28's opening, The Sweets Hereafter. This opening is incredibly boring. The jokes are stereotypical Simpsons jokes at this point. Oh wow, do you know that Homer wants his dad to die? What a surprise! The opening for this episode encapsulated everything wrong with it. They throw everything at the wall and almost nothing sticks. It's boring, flat, and unfunny. While the openings do show the quality of each episode, they aren't the meat of each episode. For that, let's turn to the first segment. The first segment of both of these episodes feature a parody of a classic horror movie. Treehouse of Horror 5 contains what might be the most memorable segment in the Halloween special's history, with its parody of Stanley Kubrick's 1980 masterpiece, The Shining. The segment not only has perfect parody of The Shining, but has some of my favorite lines in Simpsons history. The segment has perfect pacing with its jokes, and a great homage to the material it's parodying, and starts Treehouse of Horror 5's tradition of killing Groundskeeper Willie in every segment. Now, we turn our attention to The Exorcist. While The Exorcist may be just as famous as The Shining, the segment from Treehouse of Horror 28 certainly is not. I know I may seem like a broken record here, but this segment was incredibly boring. I had to look up a plot synopsis to remember some of the details, and I rewatched this segment a day ago. The jokes are as unfunny as ever, with the worst being Homer pronouncing Pazuzu as pizza. This segment also contains another problem with modern Treehouse of Horror episodes. As Quentin Reviews pointed out in his Treehouse of Horror 5 video, the only thing that distinguishes modern Simpson Treehouse of Horror episodes with regular modern Simpsons episodes is that characters will die in Treehouse of Horror. Because of that, characters getting killed in a Treehouse of Horror episode has no bearing on the plot or audience. In Nightmare Cafeteria, which I'll talk about later, the character deaths actually mattered and were shocking. But in modern Treehouse of Horror, and in this segment The Exorcist, the character deaths mean nothing since we've seen these characters die dozens of times in more ridiculous ways. Plus, all the deaths are comical. In other Treehouse of Horror segments, deaths could be done jokingly but still feel sinister. But here, the joke just seems to be, oh look, Maggie killed Flanders, hope you find that funny. So obviously, The Shining works much better than The Exorcist. Okay, time, get it, for segment number 2. The middle 2 segments are both alternate world segments, though the season 28 segment is a movie parody of the 2009 film Coraline. So let's start off with the season 5 segment, Time and Punishment. This segment revolves around Homer accidentally creating a time machine out of a toaster that sends him back to the past. Everything Homer changes in the past then affects the future, leading to tons of great alternate timelines. The main thing that's great about this segment is that it allows for creative different timelines while still having tons of great jokes. Homer shines at his all-time best here, as he perfectly reacts to every timeline he finds himself thrust into. This segment also has a great ending, and I don't think it could have ended any other way. So let's look at the polar opposite of that with Cora Lisa. This segment is really not great. First off, this seems like an odd movie to parody. It's a not super successful stop-motion family horror flick that hasn't been relevant for half a decade. While Coraline is a good movie that scared me a ton as a kid, it's also not a pop culture icon like a lot of other movies Treehouse of Horror has parodied. I wouldn't have much of a problem with this if the parody actually worked. First off, this segment misses what a lot of the great Treehouse of Horror parody segments have: a change in setting. The parodies of The Shining, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Nightmare at 20,000 Feet all don't take place in the Simpson household, or at least not for most of their runtime. What really should have happened in this segment is that the Simpsons moved to or vacation at the pink house from the original film. This is Treehouse of Horror, you can do literally anything. I don't feel the creepiness of the original Coraline in this segment because it takes place in the freaking Simpsons house. The humor in this segment is also super obvious. Lisa breaks the fourth wall almost immediately when entering the other mother world when she says, "Wow, this looks really good for a middle segment." In older Simpsons, self-deprecating / fourth wall breaking humor was more subdued and clever. Now, there is one joke that could have worked if it not for a small caveat. When Lisa is deciding whether or not to get buttons sewed into her eyes, Homer immediately kills a snake with her saxophone. This prompts her to immediately join the other family. This is supposed to play with the fact that Coraline's feelings in the actual film are much more complex, as her parents are not bad, just busy. However, this joke is undermined because the family is horrible all the time in the show and everyone just accepts it. Plenty of people have the option to get away from The Simpsons, but choose not to. Oh, and this segment also ends with a confusing and contrived "a bunch of people die and then the status quo is slightly changed" situation. This is a lazy way to end a Treehouse of Horror segment. With all that being said, I clearly think that Time and Punishment is the better segment. Now, onto the third and final segment. So we've arrived at the final segment for each episode. Each of these segments are original concepts, though Nightmare Cafeteria definitely homages a lot of elements from the movie Soylent Green, and both segments are about cannibalism. So let's start with what's known as the darkest Treehouse of Horror segment in history, Nightmare Cafeteria. This is 100% the bloodiest segment Treehouse of Horror has ever done, and it definitely has a dark theme. The plot involves Principal Skinner trying to figure out how to clear space in the detention room and deciding to have the teachers kill and then eat the students. This segment is really dark, and it's not that focused on comedy, though there are some really funny scenes, like when Marge tells Lisa and Bart to just say "don't eat me" to the teachers. However, this segment still really works, since this is a Halloween episode. However, this segment's original concepts allow for less jokes, so it's by proxy not as good as the other two segments, in Treehouse of Horror 5, that is. However, it has a hilarious musical number tacked onto the end of it that makes this segment more worthwhile. Now let's talk about Homer. This is easily the best segment in Treehouse of Horror 28. The plot involves Homer discovering that because of his unhealthy diet, he has great tasting flesh. Homer then essentially eats himself to death in increasingly absurd ways. This segment ends with Springfield eating what is left of Homer and deciding that they should eat other dead people. This segment, while not as good as Nightmare Cafeteria, has a lot more comedy. Also, some of the jokes actually are kind of funny. However, this segment is bogged down by the obliviousness of the rest of the Simpson family to Homer eating himself. In Nightmare Cafeteria, Marge knew kids were getting eaten, she just wanted Lisa and Bart to start fighting their own battles. In Homer, she doesn't notice until Homer is literally frying his bottom half in a pan. However, While Homer isn't great, it is certainly not boring, which is something I can't say for the other segments in Treehouse of Horror 28. With both episodes reviewed, it's clear to see Treehouse of Horror 5 is far superior to Treehouse of Horror 28. Unless you're IGN, you should be able to recognize how much better 5 is than 8. The drop in quality in these Halloween episodes show the problem with most modern Simpsons. It's boring, mostly unfunny, and repetitive. However, we should never forget that The Simpsons has some of the greatest episodes ever, and that the new episodes don't detract from the quality of older episodes. With all that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video and have a happy Halloween. Thank you for watching.